thank you for being here, for allowing me to briefly, because to present what is happening in terms of liberation in Latin America is a huge topic for someone that is like an elephant, and I'm only a small ant, a small creature. I don't pretend to be an elephant, and I hopefully do not look like one. But anyways, I was very challenged and thankful for what was presented in the previous panel, both by Carlos, a good friend from Mexico, and also by Jose Mario Francisco. And I think they touched many things with which I feel very close to. And I'm a little bit sad that Maria Clara Bingemer from Brazil is not able to be here because of health reasons, and that also that Kitu, another colleague from Concilium, from Congo, Leonard Kinkupu, cannot be here. May I begin by making a brief reference to the fact that more or less 10,000 years ago, you Asian peoples discovered rice, and about 7,000 years ago, Central and South American peoples discovered corn and potatoes. Having this very long human experience of nurturing products of the earth and being liberated by Mother Earth, both so those of us who are in the Americas and you people in Asia were discarded by Western dominant cultural reason, and they replaced wisdoms, struggles, and feelings of millions of persons and cultures, so-called cultures, and of spiritualities. However, there has been this resilience, this resistance, this survival. And I am inspired, like I imagine many of you are, by Mahayana Buddhism. And one of its sayings is, "Go ahead for the happiness of the multitude, out of compassion for the world." I'm also touched by Han, Chinese, and other kind of Asian concerns in terms of an intuitive illumination. This and other factors are so different from Western universal reason. Now I will try to focus on three elements. One is on basic concerns, and I join others who feel that if we reconnect with the Galilean, Semitic, Asian Jesus and his spirit, lives in personal and in the community and social dimensions may be significantly transformed. Secondly, I would like to underline some interfaith priorities, and from perspective of persons who we are in Central and South American areas, we're very much indebted to you and to others in different parts of Asia who have been doing very significant work in this so-called interfaith dialogue and interfaith praxis. And finally, I would like to underline some decolonial or also post-colonial paradoxes among us. So my first point is these basic concerns, because during thousands of years, there has been an understanding of ourselves in the universe, taking care of sacred life, of internal and also environmental liberation. we have these heritages, life-giving heritages, and this experience of light, of an ultimate light in one's heart and in one's environment. Now, if one considers what has been happening in the so-called global South, we have a variety of spiritual paths that arise out of suffering, out of what was very well underlined by Carlos, by dead who are dead, but also by dead who are living. And we also have, and there is a concern, and how can we continue dealing with our decolonial and post-colonial creative ways of thinking. And it seems to many that the Spirit of Jesus is leading us in the midst of non-Christian symbols of faith. So I will touch on this again when I speak of this interfaith praxis, which is not centered on Christian doctrine. The Latin American theological adventure has been often characterized in terms of social political liberation, and that's in part is adequate, and in part it's a caricature. Obviously, peoples who are under economic, cultural, and other forms of oppression will not only weep and be anguished, but often are able to come together and struggle for other forms of life. But many of us are aware that so-called Latin American theologies may not be reduced to certain kind of social economic categories. And why is that? Because each part of humanity, and places where I and others are, not only have incorporated, assimilated what was imposed through different kinds of Christian institutions and loudspeakers, but there has been a capacity to create new ways, what some of us are calling lived Christianities, and that has also been present in some of the conversations here. And among these lived Christianities, indigenous, Aboriginal or Native American experiences and symbols and thinking are most important. And as some of you know, I'm very thankful for 23 years in a very small indigenous community where I was able to see so-called nature, the common house, as was underlined today too, with new eyes. But not only an understanding of the environment, an understanding of history, and an understanding of the sacred images that surround us and that nurture us in different ways. Another great or major input has been Afro-Latin and North American perspectives. And because of different reasons, I've been connected with persons doing Afro-American theological work. And I think their understanding of what some call the Black Christ, and I have in mind this Nazarene Filipino image that you have here, is not only a matter of race. It is mainly, I would say, it's an experience of the sacredness in everything around us. So it's not only one image that is sacred, is in Brazilian language they speak of axé, the sacredness of life. That is also present in indigenous perspectives. And the sacredness of life is in the midst of vulnerability, of violence. So there is an experience of what is sacred because persons we need to be strengthened and to be led away from those situations of violence. Recently, and I just told one of you, Carl Gaspar, I was impressed by his, and there are many others who are doing ecological theology of liberation here in the Philippines and also in other parts of this huge continent. And indigenous peoples, Black African Americans, and also feminist theologies have been moving in terms of what is the meaning, particularly in the feminist perspective, what is the meaning of bodies whose intuitions, insights, and also its cries for life and the ability to nurture life as women allows them to recognize the sacredness of life in very peculiar, very special ways. And I would also like to recognize some of the things I've learned from some of you who are here present and others, the way women theologians in the Philippines, in India, and in other parts, in Indonesia, have been moving ahead in terms of what one of you calls distancing from West Euro-American influences, drinking deep into our own springs. And this friend says, how can Asian women be the womb of a life-giving spirituality? Because they truly question the craze of monetization, the market idols, and the power that comes from money, which threatens all forms of life. I join some of the comments made this afternoon of how capitalism or economic conditions are affecting peoples in the global south and peoples in the whole world, and how there are among rituals and among commitments, practical, concrete, social political commitments, there is an ability to imagine, to configure, to build other forms of organizing life. Now, my second point is this interfaith praxis and what I call also cutting-edge priorities. And I feel that a main priority, and many persons have been working and thinking and writing on this, is what happens in the world of today, a global world where small groups of persons and where peoples, multitudes, ochlos, the multitude that surrounded Jesus, with that expression, ochlos, are suffering because of illness, because of hunger, because of discrimination. So what goes in the direction of dreaming and contributing to a new world, a world of harmony, a world of equality, a world of interaction among different persons and groups and countries and areas of the world, I think is something that is present, not always, but is present in what is being written in terms of liberation today. And let me move now to my third point before I come to the conclusion, because there's a better speaker than I who will speak after me. I feel that we move in the midst of many paradoxes. And I will begin, thank you, I will begin with an internal paradox. Because in our American context, we have very good proposals by churches, by intellectuals, and some social movements are source of hope. But also we have many limitations. And my experience and others has been that at times persons from other parts of the world, they look at us as if we were in heaven. And we are not in heaven, we are in purgatory, where we do certain things more or less well, and there's many other things or many other concerns that are not carried out well. For example, in terms of ecology, which is a very strong rising concern and field of theological work, and you all probably know Leonardo Boff, Yvonne Guevara, and many others who are doing significant work for years now in terms of eco-theologies, eco-feminist and eco-systematic theology. That is wonderful, but that does not characterize mainstream Catholicism in our continent, not at all. In spite of what the Pope is pushing, with Laudato Si and other things. And I would also say what has begun in in several parts of our continent, which are the gender perspective. There is language about equality, about respect, about constructing new kinds of relationships among women and men, and about persons that have different kinds of life experiences. But unfortunately, we continue to have patterns of thinking that are quite exclusive in terms of either right or wrong, either acceptable or unacceptable, black and white kind of dichotomies in terms of thinking. And one finds that there are other moments in which we praise each other and we say how wonderful it is to have symbolic experiences of the sacred, like the beginning of the day here, today, here, the expressions here of dance and colors and images. But that does not often transform the kinds of way we think. So there is a separation between imagery and symbolic, qualitative communication and the interpretation of life and what is happening and the way we think and we communicate to each other. There are other things that could be mentioned, and there's a paper that you will be, at some time or other, you may look at it, that I am presenting. But I will now begin to finish, and I will say a few words in terms of what women theologians here in India have produced some years ago. And it's a vision that says the following: far, far into the distant horizon we gaze, trapped within the unrelenting web of ugly deceit, of cruel plot and hate, anguishing for the break of a new dawn. From amidst the dark clouds and haze, there arises a vision bright of a new world in the pangs of birth, a vision of communities of women, men, children, and of all nature moving together in harmony. There's also a Bengali mystic, which I quote, who, it's somewhere among my papers here, if I don't get lost here, who tells us in the 1800s, a couple of centuries ago, who says, as a lamp does not burn without oil, so a person cannot live without God. I humbly feel that what is happening for centuries among Asian communities and theologies nurture the path that we're involved in South America. So often some of us say, please do not imitate. Let us not imitate each other. Rather, let us allow each other to listen, mutual listening, a mutual closing our mouths to be silent before whoever is next to us and before the mystery of life, and also an ability to then imagine, construct a beautiful future in front of us. And I finish with a Mexican, if you show this image, it's a Mexican Asian mandala. And being circular, this comes from the south of Mexico, from the Chiapas area. There is an ability to dream of a new world that is not merely a dream, that is a passion. This new world has arisen, has begun, and will continue to be present. And we can, each of us, and different kinds of groups, theologians, pastoral practitioners, lay persons, lay women, lay men, we can be bearers, we can give birth to this circle of figures, colors, persons, and dreams and struggles for a new life. Thank you.